If you were with us live a couple of weeks ago, or even if you happen to watch our live stream then, we started a new series of messages titled The Power of One. And the goal of this series is to show what can be accomplished through one person who will completely surrender themselves to God. We sometimes look at how many people there are in the world, and we think, what can I do? There are so many problems. There are so many things that need to be accomplished. I'm only one person. How can I do anything to really help in this situation? What difference can I make? I'm not an authority figure. I don't work for the government. I'm not the president or the king of a nation, or I don't have millions or billions of dollars to invest to make things better. What can I really do? The list of excuses goes on and on. We feel that we're just a little fish in a small pond, in a big pond, and that only the big fish get noticed. But the truth is, anyone can make a difference. Sometimes we make a difference for the better. Sometimes we make a difference for the worse. But all of us are affecting people every day. Sometimes we just don't know that we're affecting people. Right now, everyone's talking about COVID-19. This virus is a perfect example of what can start with one person. From the information I've been able to gather, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's researched this, I'm sure all of you guys have been watching news feeds and looking things up and trying to figure out how things happen, but from what I've been able to gather, the first known case of the COVID-19 virus in humans was reported on November 17th of last year in Wuhan, China. From that one person in China, the virus has now spread to almost every nation of the world. It's infected hundreds of thousands of people, and it's already claimed thousands of lives. But even for those who haven't been physically affected by the virus yet, it has affected in some way almost every person on the planet, because we all have precautions. We have rules that we're supposed to follow. You can't be too close to somebody, and you can't have too many people in a room together. And some of us have been cut back in our hours from work, or we've had other things that have affected us. From one person, the whole world, essentially, has been affected. Now, please don't accuse me of trying to put the blame on a certain country, on a certain person. I don't believe that anybody intended for this to happen. I'm just trying to illustrate that everything starts somewhere. And what starts with us is going to affect other people in some way. We sometimes make an influence by something that we do. Other times we make an influence by choosing not to do anything. But today I want to talk about something that all of us can do to make a difference. Something that can start with one person, or basically it'd be better if it started with a bunch of persons. If each of us would do this, it could make a difference, and it would impact the entire world. If we learn the principles that we talk about today, it can change our lives, and it can change the lives of others. Now, a lot of what I say this morning, because it's the thing that's in the forefront of everybody's mind, it's the reason we're even meeting today in our homes like we are. Many of you would be joining us in person if it wasn't for this. So it's in the forefront of our mind. So a lot of what I say is going to be filtered through the lens of the current situation, the crisis that's facing us right now. But this principle is something that can be carried over to all areas of life. It doesn't just deal with the COVID-19 virus. Some of us have been forced to reckon with the virus because it's changed our schedule and the way we do things. It's impossible to turn on the TV or to listen to the radio or to check anything online without having some kind of something put in front of us. Or when we talk to people, our conversation, no matter what it starts out, it always somehow seems to point to this virus in some form. So the question I want to ask this morning, and this is the title of my message this morning, when we get into these conversations or when we're exposed to these things, are we a thermometer or are we a thermostat? And we're going to be talking about these two things this morning. Jesus often used stories of common things to illustrate his message. And that's really loud when I put that down on the table, but I have to avoid that. Jesus often used stories of common things to illustrate his message. Now, I promise that I am going to bring out a spiritual message this morning. We're going to have some Bible in here, but please bear with me as I start out by just trying to bring some comparisons between the thermometer and the thermostat that I hopefully will translate into a message from God that we can all use. Let's begin by picturing in our minds a thermometer. Thermometers come in many different shapes and sizes. They can be digital or mechanical. Some are designed for sensing the temperature of food. Others are to tell us what the outside air is or the inside air. Sometimes we use them, and a lot of people are using them right now to see if maybe they've been infected by the virus. It's testing our body temperature. The thermometer that I brought with me today normally hangs on our patio. And it hangs right outside our kitchen window, so at any time we can look outside and we can see what the temperature is. It might help us decide what we're going to wear when we leave for work in the morning. Are we going to, how warm of a coat are we going to put on? Or, sometimes I'll look at that and then I'll go to check and see if I've got to scrape my windshield on my car or something. This helps me decide how to plan my day and what I'm going to do. It also lets me know when it's time to maybe, put my sprinklers away for the year and those types of things. Now let's look at some of the characteristics of a thermometer. The first thing that I want you to notice or take note of on a thermometer, and you can't really see it by looking at this thermometer, but as I talk about it, you're going to realize it's true. The first thing that we want to look at a thermometer is passive. That's to say, thermometers don't set the temperature. They merely reflect and register the temperature that's around it. They tell us what the environment is. A thermometer has no power. It doesn't have the ability to change anything. It is changed by its environment and simply tells us what's going on out there. And that's okay, because it wasn't designed to change anything. It was designed to get a sense on what's going on and let us know what's going on so we can plan accordingly. The majority of people alive today are like thermometers. Their mood changes, their language changes, their anxiety level changes based on the circumstances that they find themselves in. They read one news article or hear one person talking about how bad things are, and instantly their blood begins to boil, and they think it's the end of the world. Then their surroundings change, and just as quickly as they thought the world was ending, the level goes down again and they feel a little more peace because now they're around other people who are a little more peaceful. Or they read something else that says, you know what, that article you read wasn't right. It's not quite as bad as what you thought it was. Calm down. And they're easily able to bring that back down. The second point I want to make about the thermometer is that it is possible for a thermometer to get a wrong reading. If I took a thermometer and I placed it inside the window on the dash of my car and the sun was beating through that window, when I got into my car, my thermometer may tell me that it's 220 degrees inside my car. Now, it's probably going to be pretty hot in the car, especially if I had the windows up. But even with the windows down and air circulating through there, just that sun coming through the window and hitting the thermometer is going to give the thermometer a false reading. Likewise, if I place my thermometer too close to the air conditioner in my house, it's going to tell me the environment in the house is cooler than what it really is because it's got that cool air blowing on the thermometer. It's not going to give me an accurate temperature. So I guess the take home here is we have to be careful who we hang out with or who we're listening to or what we're reading. If you like living in fear, surround yourself with people that are fearful. But if you want a little more peace, surround yourself with people that can help calm your fears. In almost every situation, there are people at both ends of the spectrum. Some always look at worst-case scenario. Others refuse to admit that anything is wrong at all. And usually, the truth can be found somewhere between those two extremes. If we go either side, we're probably going to be living in false information. Now, let's put the thermometer down for a moment, and let's talk about the thermostat. This is the thermostat we had in our house. I just updated it several months ago with a smart thermometer, or smart thermostat, hoping it would make me smarter. It hasn't really done anything yet, but this is the one I took off my house. I brought it for an illustration this morning. Unlike the thermometer, which is passive, a thermostat is active. A thermometer was designed to reflect the current temperature. The thermostat was designed to change the temperature. The thermostat gets involved. It controls the environment. instead of letting the environment control it. If the room is too hot, the thermostat helps cool it down. If the room is too cold, the thermostat helps warm it up. But I want to point out that even though the thermostat helps with that, the thermostat is powerless to do anything on its own. In order for a thermostat to work properly, first off, it has to have a thermometer built in. And it has to have a thermometer that is regulated properly, because if it's getting a false reading, it's going to call for the wrong source to cool or to heat. So it has a thermometer built in. The thermometer has to be regulated. It has to be sensing the correct temperature. And then based on the information it receives, the thermostat says, okay, something is not right here. I am going to help change it. It is possible to heat up or cool down a room without a thermostat. You can have a heater and simply plug it in or turn it on. It's going to heat the room up, but eventually it's going to get too hot because the thermostat doesn't know when to stop that heat. Or you can have an air conditioner without a thermostat built in, and the air conditioner will keep cooling it until pretty soon you're living in a freezer. The thermostat has to sense all that and call for the proper source at the right time. And that brings me to point 2 on a thermostat. A thermostat must be connected to the source. The thermostat helps make the changes, but it doesn't make the changes on its own. It must be connected to the source. The thermostat is designed to detect the temperature and then to either call on the heater or call on the air conditioner to make the necessary changes to the environment. Unless the thermostat is connected to the source, nothing will change. The thermostat can know something isn't right, and it could want to change it. It can say, I wish I could change this, but without the proper connection, nothing is ever going to happen. Has anyone figured out where I'm going with this yet? Anybody tying in a spiritual application? Most people, as I've already said, are like thermometers. They simply react to what's happening around them. Thermometers are great, but God doesn't want us to simply reflect our surroundings. We need to recognize what is happening, but instead of living passive lives, God wants us to be spiritual thermostats. We should know what the climate is, and we should be able to sense when something is wrong, but instead of simply knowing something's wrong, we need to know what to do to change that. Many people sit around complaining about how things are. Or they go out and they try to solve things on their own. That would be like a thermostat that's connected to the wrong source. You know what? I could probably connect a thermostat to anything. I'm not an electrician, but I think if I had the knowledge, I could probably connect the thermostat to just a motor of some kind or, something else. And then when it said it wanted heat, it would be turning on something else. Instead of turning on heat, it needs to be connected to the right source. As believers, we're called to be spiritual thermostats. We should be able to sense when things aren't right. But instead of just knowing they're not right, we should be able to call upon the source, the one who can truly change things, and not get all upset about it's too hot or it's too cold. Instead of saying, you know what? I know how to change that. I can't do it myself, but I can call upon the one who can change it. Only God can make the necessary changes. But he waits for us to ask before he moves. Just like only the air conditioner or the heater can actually change the climate. But the heater or the air conditioner waits on the thermostat to send the message and say, we need heat. We need air conditioning. There are many instances in Scripture where we see the difference between thermometers and thermostats. The Israelite nation during the time of Moses was a perfect example. The Israelites were thermometers. They were really good at sensing when something was wrong. And to them, things were always wrong. It's like they were never happy. No matter what they had, they would always go to the worst case scenario and think, we're dying. How many times did they grumble and complain and say, we're going to die? Moses, on the other hand, he could sense what they're sensing. The people are hungry. We've got the army behind us. We've got the sea in front of us. Something's not right. He knew that it wasn't right. But instead of grumbling and complaining, he called on the source. He said, God, we need your intervention. We need your help. The Israelites, they were grumblers. It was too hot or it was too cold. They didn't like it. They grumbled to themselves. They grumbled to each other. But all their grumbling ever did was make things worse. They grumbled so much that they convinced themselves it was the end of the world. Moses would call on God. And when he called on God, every time he called on God, God intervened. God provided. God supplied. Moses knew where to go. He said, God, it's not right. We need help. And God solved the situation. Sometimes we have the idea that as believers, we shouldn't have any problems. And if we have problems, it's because there's something wrong in us. In fact, there are people that teach, that if you've got a problem, if you're a believer and you have an illness or something's not going right, then you need to figure out what sin you've committed because, if you were really living a right life, you wouldn't have that problem. The Bible doesn't teach that. We will have problems. We expect God to walk ahead of us and smooth the road out and make it all very smooth. But there will be bumps in the road, even for believers. There are some problems that affect all of us. When the economy struggles, we all feel the effects of it. When a pandemic ravages the land, it doesn't pass us by. We aren't exempt from cutbacks or layoffs. Someday we'll be taken out of this world. And when that happens, our lives will be problem-free. There will be no more sickness. There will be no more pain. We won't have to worry about where our next paycheck's going to come from. When we are with God for eternity, our problems will be gone. But as long as we live here in this world, we will walk through many of the same problems that the world walks through. But when we face those things, we don't have to face them alone like everyone else. We don't have to get worried and have our anxiety level go up and the temperature rising like in the thermometer. We can simply say, you know what? I know the source, and I'm connected to the source. And I am going to be the thermostat that calls on God to change things. It's not right. I can't do it, but I know who can. We can have peace in the midst of the storm because we have a connection with someone who can change the situation. But even if he doesn't, we still don't need to be afraid because we know that he is in control no matter what happens. I love the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And those of you guys that attend our church, I talk about them a lot. They are one of my favorite Bible stories. I got a lot of favorite Bible stories, but they're one of them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were facing the fire. They were threatened with a fire. If you don't do this, you will be thrown into the fire. But they weren't afraid because they knew that even if they were thrown into the fire, God would be with them. But the coolest part of the story to me isn't that they went into the fire and were saved from the fire. The coolest part of the story to me was the response when they were facing that situation. They didn't know whether or not the king was going to take their apology and their explanation and let them off or not. In fact, they fully expected him to throw them into the fire. They didn't know for sure if God would protect them from the fire. They knew that he could. They didn't know if he would. I love their response in Daniel chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. It says, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. They knew he could. They didn't know if he would, but they knew he could because if we read on, it says, but even if he does not, we will not serve, or we want you to know, Your Majesty, we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. They were not the only Israelites living in the kingdom. There were other people who worshiped the God that they worshiped. And maybe there were some others with them. Maybe Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are the only ones we read about. But I don't think so. The other people, they got alarmed by the declaration by the king. And we're facing this trial, and we're going to have to give in, and we're going to have to do what everybody else is doing, because if we don't do this, we're going to go into the fire, and we don't want to go into the fire. That's going to hurt. They were thermometers. They reacted to the situation around them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, you know what? We're in the same environment. We're facing the exact same thing. But we're not going to be afraid. Instead, we're going to call on God and see if God will deliver us. No, we don't know that he will, but we know that he's the only one that can truly change us. I mean, if we go against God's command and we bow to the idol, then we're going to have to answer to God. We'd rather answer to the fire than answer to God. So we're going to trust God. And you know what? And even a cooler part of the story, I don't use the word cool a lot. Fire, cool, right? The really cool thing about the story is because they called on God and they trusted on God, the environment of the whole nation changed. When the king looked into that fire and he saw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walking around and talking and probably having a party there in a fire, and he saw the fourth man with him, he said, this fourth man looks like the Son of God. Well, of course it does. It was the Son of God. The king called them forth. And when he saw what their God did, the king made a declaration that everyone in the country should acknowledge the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I'm sure he tore down his statue at that time and said, this statue is nothing compared to that God, because they listened to God and talked to God. The environment of the whole nation changed. Daniel essentially did the same thing. A few chapters later, we have the story of Daniel going in the lion's den, and the king made the declaration that no one could pray to anyone except for him for a period of 30 days. There were other people living in the city, other Israelites, who knew that was not a right thing. And they must have listened to the king and said, well, we'll just put God off for 30 days. Daniel said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a thermostat. I'm going to keep praying to the God who can make a difference. Once again, he didn't know for sure that God would protect him, but he said, I'm going to put my faith in the one who can protect me, the one who can make a difference. And once again, we see the same thing happening. Because of his faith and because of what God did for him, the whole nation was brought to their knees because they saw a miracle working God. That's the response that we need to have. We're in the midst of trouble. I know that my God is able to deliver me from this mess. I know that my God is able to protect me from this virus. Now, I don't know if he will. I wish I could tell every one of you listening to me this morning, I wish I could promise all of you that if you keep your faith in God, none of you will come down with the virus. That it won't take any lies for you, those of you that are listening to me this morning. I wish I could promise you that your job will not be affected, that you will continue to receive your income. I can't promise any of that. But I do know that if anybody can do it, God can. And even if we have to go through the fire, even if we have to experience some of the effects of this catastrophe, God will be with us through it. My faith isn't in the government. I'm glad they're doing what they have human power to do. But you know what? Human power is limited. It only goes so far. And I'm glad I can call on the one who can go beyond what the government can do for me. My faith is not in medical science. I'm hoping that they can come up with a cure or a vaccine or something to help with this situation. But even if they do, I believe that it's God that's given them that knowledge and God that's helping them with that. But my faith is not in them. Their knowledge is limited. My faith is in God. He's the only one that is all-powerful. I know that my God can deliver me from the financial crisis. My God can deliver me from the epidemic. My God can completely protect me from all of it. But even if he doesn't, I'm not afraid. I'm going to face it because I know that he is in it with me. He faced death itself and came out of the grave victorious. He has already defeated sickness. He's already defeated death. In John chapter 16, we read these words that Jesus spoke to his disciples. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. I want you to have peace. But then he goes on to say, in this world you will have trouble. You will. It's just going to come. It's part of living in this world. This world is a world of trouble. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart. It goes back to what he said about, I want you to have peace. Don't stress about it. Don't have anxiety about it. Don't worry about it. Even when you're going through these troubled times, take heart because I have overcome the world. When we face trouble of any kind, we don't need to be afraid. We can have peace because we know the one who has already brought the victory. But as believers, we have the privilege of not only knowing the one who has already given the victory, we also have the responsibility to bring that to the world. God has a miracle waiting, but he's waiting for us to activate the miracle by calling on him. We are the thermostat that calls on the source to make the difference in the world. But you know what? There's a switch right here. This is the on-off switch. Even though I'm connected, even though I know God, even though I know God can make a difference, I can choose to turn that switch off. And if I turn that switch off, the thermostat's not going to do any good. The source is still connected. The source is still waiting to do something, but because I've chosen to disconnect myself for a temporary time from that source, nothing changes. I need to say, I will do my job. Not that God doesn't already know what's going on, but I will do my job. I will call on him, and I will point other people to him. Instead of simply quoting the statistics and repeating what we've read or what we've heard and bringing more alarm into the world, we can be pointing people to the source of peace. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 13 and 14, another one of my favorite verses. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command locusts to devour the land, or send a plague among my people. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. Does our land need healing right now? Yes, it needs healing. How does that happen? Partly by obeying the regulations and keeping our safe distancing from people, and that can help. But the real healing comes from God. And how does that happen? The word if. If my people will pray. If my people will call upon the source. But many of us, I believe, have turned the switch to off. We're just simply trying to survive, trying to get through the next day, trying to figure out where we're going to get our toilet paper from. We need to turn the switch to on. Say, I will be the thermostat. I see what everybody else sees. Yes, things are falling apart or appear to be falling apart. But you know what? I still know who holds the world. I'm not going to be alarmed. I'm not going to be worried. I'm not going to worry for myself, but I'm also going to encourage others. I'm going to lead them to the source so they can be connected also. And if we begin to do our job, and we begin to call upon God. It says, if we do that, then He will heal our land. Everybody knows there's a crisis right now. You don't have to go out and tell that. You don't have to repost what somebody else posts. Everybody already knows it's bad. Even those who couldn't sense it or know about it because everybody's talking about it. People are in panic mode. But we need to be thermostats. We are connected to the healer. We are connected to the provider. We are connected to the giver of peace. It's time for the church to rise up and let God be God. Let's call on the source and let Him bring the healing that is so desperately needed. Yes, we need physical healing, but more importantly, we need spiritual healing. Our God can do both, but it only happens when we, the thermostats, do our part. When we call on Him, then He goes into action. So let's be the thermostats that we're called to be. Let's not be passive in this time of trouble. Let's not just be thermometers that pass on the climate. Let's be changers that change the climate. Right now, we have a lot of extra time, many of us. What are we doing with that extra time? You know what we should be doing? Getting on our knees, falling on our faces before God, saying, God, I'm going to use this time for something productive. I'm not just going to look for the latest statistic or look up to see what's happening out there. I am going to get on my face and I am going to call on you to make a difference, because only you can make the difference. We need to be active by having faith in and calling upon God and proclaiming Him to a world that so desperately needs Him. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that you are a God who can do all things. You know, we look at these things and, you know, even this virus we're going through, and we know that medical science has already come up with cures for many things, but here's a new one. And eventually, they probably will come up with a cure for this. But you're not limited. You have the power to do it now. You can do all things. So as we look out and we watch the news reports, we listen to everybody else's panicking and watch what they're doing, we're not going to join in with that. We sense the environment. We sense that something's not right. But we are going to do what we have been designed to do. We are going to be thermostats. We are going to get on our knees. We are going to seek your face. We are going to call on you. Because when we begin to pray, that's when you can do what you've been waiting to do. So I pray that you would help us all to spend more time in prayer. As you've given us this time, let us spend this time with you. And when we hear other people that are worried, other people that are filled with anxiety, let us live that life of peace in front of them so they begin to ask us, how can you be so peaceful? How can you be so calm through this? Don't you see what's going on? Don't you see what everyone else is doing? We say, I'm not afraid, because I know the source of anything I need. You are the true source of our finances. You are the true source of our healing. Whatever we need can be found in you. So let us seek you and you alone. Give us peace and let us trust in you, but help us bring that peace to everyone else that we meet. Amen. If you joined us today and maybe you don't have that peace and you want to know more about that peace, feel free to respond to us. If you're on Facebook, you can just do a live message right now. You can go to our website. We have an information form you can fill out there. Call us up. We want to talk to you. We want to help you find the peace that we have found in Jesus Christ. Thank you for joining us today.